Foster observations. I'm not going to pretend to know what it means to be a foster parent, or even what it's like to be within the system as a child or a teen. But I do know what makes sense. And speaking of sense, it makes no sense to attack a child multiple times for growing pains. And particular, especially in this particular, situation. Pain that any normal individual in any broken system will and has experienced. From what I've observed, those kids in foster systems are challenging to raise. Rightfully so, but not impossible. Further observations suggest that so called adults take on the burden of someone else's failure to rear future adults properly. And as commendable as that can be, ultimately what I see are cash grabs based on the foster parents' actions. Example, I observed a female foster parent speaking ill of and causing pain to and around a child or children who are already full of despair and pain, among other soul-breaking burdens. I'm not going to pretend that male foster parents aren't doing the same or worse, but I can only speak to what I've observed in public. One can only imagine what occurs behind the scenes. The first scenario was in a store with 3 foster kids and a female foster parent. The teens were caught stealing knives, and the foster parent spoke negatively about them openly for anyone to hear and experience, adding further pain to the situation. I can only imagine what those children, those teens were thinking at that time of that embarrassment. Even though they're embarrassing themselves by stealing, this so-called adult, the so-called parent, made things worse. Now, I'm all for punishment when warranted, but the way I saw it was, one, why would the teens need knives? And 2, if they're stealing knives, does it make sense to further embarrass them by creating animosity? She also blurted out that she has to take them wherever she goes because her husband or guy doesn't want them at home with him, further adding fuel to the fire of mental anguish. And this is, exactly what stepdads experience. I don't know what stepmoms experience, but stepdads, experience this to the same or higher degree. Now, the second scenario was with a more minor foster male child who clearly wasn't being properly cared for. Essentially, he was attained for check purposes only. I say that because his lips were severely chapped and looked to be cracked, and anyone knows what dry, cracked lips feel like. I can only imagine his despair. That particular, just off his appearance alone is not going to promote better behavior, because we all know that when people feel bad, they do bad and they do it more easily because they feel bad. They want to feel better. They want to feel good. And sometimes doing bad things makes people feel good. Makes no sense and sense at the same damn time. So this little boy, he and a smaller female foster kid essentially wandered off from the female so-called foster parent. She then checked out her products that she selected, knowing that they weren't with her. You know, talk about rearing them up properly or improperly in this case. So now those children, should they have children on their own, if they lose their children, they're not going to know and think to go and search for their children to ensure their safety based on the foster parents' bad behavior. You see the lackluster example that this lady, sadly a melanated lady, had been participating in. It was deplorable. Now, to her credit, she didn't leave them in the store, but she didn't proactively search or even have the store paging system used for lost children. She just stood at the exit, blathering on about teaching a lesson by not being there as she's supposed to be. That makes sense to you? I found it grossly disgusting. It was just deplorable behavior from someone who shuns bad or unfavorable behavior. Talk about a hypocrite. Lastly, this last one had nothing to do with a foster parent, but an actual dad who lost his kid within the store. He did notice that the kid was gone, and when the reunion transpired, he seemed unbothered that he lost the child. You know, it was one of those moments where I wanted to incite violence and punch him in his face for such badass behavior. That's how I felt when I reunited him with his dad. As a man who's fought to attain his second-born from the streets, and the other parent, who also viewed him as a cash cow, I find the aforementioned disgusting behavior, and it harms more than it heals. I also recognize that not everyone can be saved. Does that extend to children? I believe so. But it doesn't make the observed situations okay. And that's the reality.